Well, hello there. I didn't see you come in. Make yourself at home. Have a drink. While I give some attention to some underappreciated characters and storylines that I personally love. And I hope you grow to love as well.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back. Today we are reading Swamp Thing number 170. And oh my gosh, this is the penultimate issue of this volume of Swamp Thing, and I can't believe it. Honestly, this has been such a good, whole volume. There was only a couple parts that kind of slowed down. Maybe the Doug Wheeler run, maybe the Martin Pasco stuff at the very beginning. But since Alan Moore took on, everything's been pretty solid. And in the comic world, that is a rarity because most of the time, all you can hope for is a solid run from one writer, much less you got 5 or 6 here that did a pretty good job. So for the next episode, I'll let you guys know what the plans are for the podcast going forward. And I'll be taking a break because I've literally been reading Swamp Thing for this podcast for about 4 years. So that's a long time. But I'll let you know what all those plans are officially in the next episode. But before we get into issue 170, just a bit of catch up. Swamp Thing has been completing the trials of all the different parliaments. So far, he is in control of water, air, and earth. And he's currently going through the trials of the Parliament of Flames. Once Swamp Thing has control over all the elements, his plan is to delete every living thing on the earth and start over with a new race of people that he creates. And as you can imagine, this idea is not very liked by humans. So there's a couple different factions that have gone against Swamp Thing in order to stop him. We had the magical DC characters like John Constantine, the Phantom Stranger, and Timothy Ravenwind. And they each had a mission that was at least supposed to distract Swamp Thing. And the first one of them that did anything was Timothy Ravenwind, who resurrected Anton Arcane from hell. And it turns out Anton was a changed man. He was actually repentant, and he even actually apologized to Swamp Thing for everything. But that did not end how everybody thought. There was no big battle, and Swamp Thing was not challenged. Then the 2 successful missions were from the Phantom Stranger, who has brought Swamp Thing's plan to the attention of a being known as the Word, who is the literal word of God. And you might have guessed also that maybe God doesn't want Swamp Thing killing humans because they are God's creation. And also it's kind of blasphemy to kill God's creation and then start your own because you're saying you're a god. And in the process of tracking down Swamp Thing, the Word is stopped by all the different parliaments and he has destroyed them, but Swamp Thing still retains the powers of those elements. And last but not least, we got John Constantine, whose plan was to steal some wishing matches from L. Senior Blake, and he did that, and he went to the garden where Swamp Thing lives, and he tried to talk Swamp Thing out of what he was planning on doing, but talking didn't work, and unfortunately, John did end up using the matches to wish that Swamp Thing was human again. And they did work because we did see Swamp Thing turn into Alec Holland the Human. And the last thing that kind of happened that humans did to try to stop Swamp Thing was the government has kidnapped Swamp Thing's daughter, Tefe, who is supposed to be able to defeat the Word because she's been trained by the Parliament of Trees to do so. And the government was able to find her because Abby actually called them and reported where her daughter was to them. So that gets us all caught up. Right now, she is in a lab with Jason Woodrue, the Floronic Man, and it seems like they're going to do some tests on her. So first things first, with issue 170, we got the cover. We see what looks like a laboratory, and we also see Jason Woodrue's head, and his eyes are open like he's dead on the ground. And standing just behind him is the green glowing silhouette of who I assume is Tefe, because we can see her silver hair outlined in green. And we also see on this page that this is written by Mark Miller with art by Phil Hester and Kim DeMolder. And as we turn to the first page, we start off in New Orleans, and we see Chester and his ex-lover Liz Tremaine, and they're sitting in her convertible in front of a diner, and I guess Abby's getting food for them. And Chester's saying to her, "Poor Abby. Turning Tefe over to those government guys must have been the hardest thing she's ever done. People shouldn't have to make decisions like that. It's not fair." And Liz replies, "Yeah, Chester, poor Abby." And Chester continues, "You know, to be honest, I was kind of glad she did it. I mean, deep down. I know that sounds horrible, but I really didn't like the idea of visiting Alec and trying to stop him. I was too scared. Jesus, that's so pathetic, isn't it? My best friend practically sentences her daughter to death, and I'm quietly happy because it makes my life easier. No wonder you dumped me, Liz. Your girlfriend's probably more of a man than I ever was. How am I ever going to sort myself out?" And then Chester looks over and he sees a couple cops that are walking out of the diner. And this is actually a callback to that What If issue where Chester became right-wing and part of that was him becoming a police officer. So it's just a little nod to that. But it seems like maybe that's not that far of a reality because we do see Chester mold the idea of him becoming a police officer over in his head. And he turns to Liz and he says, "Tell me something. Do you reckon I'd look good in a uniform?" Then we turn the page and we cut to a high security facility where Dr. Woodrue is taking a shower to wash off all his human paint that he puts on during the day around people. So this is the laboratory where they're holding Tefe. So over the panels of him taking a shower and walking around his flat, we get a journal entry from him that says, "Under any normal circumstances, I would look upon this mission as a success, but unfortunately I can only regard the capture and containment of the Tefe child as a necessary evil. Had she been allowed to carry out her instructions, there is no doubt she would have saved her father from the trap we set for him and hastened the swamp god's planned global apocalypse. A concept which, I must confess, still excites a little part of me untouched by Arkham Asylum. Tonight at midnight, a new world was to have been forged. A young planet, devoid of flesh, renewed and reborn, to face the new millennium with more health and vigor than it has enjoyed in centuries. A world I've dreamed of since my sapling days. And yet, I chose to help the humans who have threatened me and those I love for countless years. I betrayed my master, and I can never be forgiven." Then we see Woodrue walk out of his room down the halls of this laboratory area, and he walks by a big window that looks into the room that has the containment box where Tefe is being held. And as Woodrue stares and looks at her, he can see her looking back at him. And over these panels, his journal entry continues. "My devotion to the swamp god is well known, but I am afraid suicide is not within my nature. Not only did he plan to rid this world of humans, but also certain plants and minerals. Some of us were to be sacrificed upon the altar of evolution. This was simply unacceptable. As chance would have it, however, Tefe has been neutralized, and there is every possibility that, without her help, her father is already dead. A notion which fills me with a curious mixture of relief and sadness. Now my only joy is the limitless access which they have given me to the child to conduct my experiments and perhaps ascertain the nature of her abilities. It appears she can manipulate flesh as easy as her father or I could animate the natural environment. I have suggested we use this in the battle against cancer and physical deformities. No doubt they'll make her into an H-bomb." And as Tefe is looking at Woodrue through the little porthole glass of her box, she's not saying anything or doing anything, but she is looking at him with very big eyes, almost like she's trying to say something to him or reach out to him. Then we turn the page and we cut to the stone garden where Alec Holland now stands in front of the Word. And the Word says to him, "Holland, I have come to kill you." And we also see on this page the name of the issue is Trial by Fire, Part 5, Apocalypse Now. And we see Alec kind of put two and two together, and he's realized his friend Constantine has betrayed him. So he says to himself, "Constantine?" And then he looks around frantically and yells, "Constantine!" But the Word says to him, "He has deserted you, Holland. It is said that the fool seldom stays to witness the consequences of his questionable actions. You and I are alone now. There is no one coming to your aid." And then Alec Holland asks, "How did he do this to me?" And the Word replies, "Although your abilities rivaled those of the Voice himself, your defenses were not impenetrable. One strike of a match and a silent magic wish, and John Constantine stripped away your godhood for 1 hour. More than enough time for what I have in mind. Ironically, the wishing matches were to be a gift from the Parliament of Flames when you passed your final trial. They are the oldest fragments of the sun to be found upon this earth, each imbued with a little bit of elemental consciousness. Theirs is the oldest magic known to man, but mine is older still, and I came here because you dared to rise above your station. You fancied yourself a god. The Voice can no longer tolerate this. I must bring you to an end now, Holland. Nothing exists which can alter this event." Then we turn the page and we cut back to Woodrue, and it seems they're getting to release Tefe from her box into a containment chamber that they have built much similar to that box, but just bigger. And as some men push the buttons to open the box, we get some narration from Woodrue's journal that says, "Tefe's abilities appear to be awesome indeed, and, if uncontrolled, could prove devastating. I am, therefore, pleased to report the vessel I designed to hold her is working perfectly. The basic concept behind the elaborate design of the container was to divorce the subject from the source of her power, that is, the Earth itself, a principle which has also been applied to the containment chamber built to house the child more permanently. Breaching the confines of this chamber might somehow compromise its negation of her abilities, so all the experimentation must be done via remote control, an order which must be strictly observed. No risks must be taken here, no possibilities left in any way to chance. It is essential to remember that we are not dealing with a human child, regardless of outward appearances. Tefe was not created as a catalyst to bridge the gap between the plant and animal kingdoms. She was never intended to be a being of harmony. This was simply misinformation. Tefe was created to kill. And in the panel under this last line, we do see a very scared-looking Tefe as she's released from her box and she stares at Woodrue through the glass. And then she walks over to the viewing window and she puts her hand to it, and Woodrue, almost as if he's being called, puts his hand to it right where hers is. Then we see a look in her eyes, almost like once again she's trying to communicate with Woodrue, and over these panels, Woodrue's journal narrates, "Watching her, it's impossible to believe. Feeling her way around her new environment, as helpless in there as any ordinary 7-year-old girl. Her mind must be racing, making an endless number of calculations, trying to figure a way out of her prison and to do what she's been trained for. Realizing no physical means of escape exists, she adopts a more psychological approach. Ushering me close to the glass, she tries her best to appeal to the most basic aspects of my non-human nature. She offers me a guarantee of survival in her father's improbable future, a prominent place in the new order which waits to replace mankind. But only if I do as she asks and give her a chance to escape. Fearing my response to such offers, the United States military has placed me under permanent armed guard. But this really is quite unnecessary. The simple truth is that I do not trust her. My answer is a definite no. End of story." Then we cut back to the garden with Alec and the Word, and Alec is saying to him, "You're wrong about one thing. I'm not on my own here. Tefe's been trained to deal with you, and she'll be with us any moment. I suggest you organize your defenses. The child is a considerable opponent, and will do anything to ensure my survival." And the Word replies, "She can do nothing. Any preparations made would be quite unnecessary. The creature has already been terminated." And Alec is shocked to hear this, and he says, "What?" And the Word continues, "The earthbound parliaments have also been dealt with, and the freelance elements who roam this world have either betrayed you or fallen by my hand. Your elemental power bases have been destroyed. The sum of their knowledge now lives only in you, the last of a soon-to-be extinct kind. There are no options left. Every possible outcome has been considered. Nothing has been left to chance. Now, fall to your knees, Holland. Pray to the voice for a quick and painless death, and perhaps he will grant mercy upon your immortal soul." But Alec does not kneel. In fact, he has a little smirk on his face. And then he turns his back on the Word, and the Word says to him, "You surprise me, Holland. It strikes me as odd that someone awaiting execution should seek to torment his executioner. But in the end, it matters not. One thing does puzzle me, though. Your reasons. Why have you taken part in this blasphemous uprising? The voice gave you life when he opened his mouth, just as he gave life to us all. Is this how you repay an act of kindness?" And at that, Alec turns his head and says, "Your God doesn't understand kindness, only blind obedience. He wants us to do whatever he says. As far as the natural world is concerned, it isn't enough to simply exist. We want more from our lives. This is why we created our parliaments in the first place. Don't you understand? We want a voice of our own. Your God didn't create mankind as a selfless act. He did so because he was alone and wanted someone who might shower him with praise. The earth was considered a playground for these foul human creatures from the beginning. He made man in his own image and allowed him to abuse my power whichever way he pleased. They cleared us to make space for walking hamburgers, roasted us in territorial wars. Even the 7 seas of this world have become poisoned, and the skies diseased, while your God idly watches. Now we say enough is enough. We suspected this would happen so very long ago, when we first heard that your God planned to make the dust sit up and walk. And so we devised a very clever plan. The 4 individual elements were no challenge to the voice alone, but we knew if we could somehow combine our resources, no one could stand against us. The world would be ours for the taking. Our slavery would be a thing of the past. God created man in his own image, and we hoped to use this power against him. We selected suitable humans and impressed ourselves upon their consciousness, but none of them truly aspired to godhood. Not until I came along. And then Alex stares right into the word's eyes and he continues saying, "Haven't you ever wondered what went wrong with the world? Don't you ever stop to think you could do better when you look at the suffering around you? Have you ever questioned God's judgment?" And the word looks down on him and says, "Never. His word is gospel." And at this, Alec actually breaks down and begins to cry, saying, "Oh Lord, Jesus, I'm standing here trying to rationalize why I want to murder the human race. And Jesus Christ, what am I saying? This is unbelievable." So it seems maybe Alec's human side is taken over or something. And as tears stream down his face, he stares up at the stars and he continues saying, "Sometimes I freeze for a second and think about the past. And I remember all those things the Parliament of Trees told me happened to Alec Holland. Not to me. They never happened to me. But my God, they seem so real. I remember the first day at school and how scared I was when Mom left me alone, and the ripped porno magazines my friend and I found in the woods, and the day I chipped my tooth when I flew over the handlebars of the bike they bought me for Christmas." The word cuts in, "Holland." But Alec ignores him and he continues saying, "Sometimes all that human stuff feels like the real world, and this is all just a dream. It's like an actor saying my lines, and I'm somewhere else entirely. Oh God, I don't want to die. Not again." And the word interjects, "Holland, stop talking. Just close your eyes." And then the word raises his hand from beneath his cloak, and it bursts into a holy flame. Then we cut back to New Orleans, but this time we see Abby is on a bridge overlooking a river, and we can see someone walk up behind her and pull out a cigarette and say, "All right, darling. Lovely night for looking over a bridge and contemplating suicide. What's the matter? Nothing good on telly?" And Abby doesn't even turn around. She just says, "Please, just go away. I don't even know you." And the man says, "Course you do. Everyone knows the suicide fairy." And then we see John Constantine strike a match and light the cigarette he pulled out. And he continues saying, "I just pop by to say, don't jump. You've got everything to live for. A life's a terrible thing to waste. And all that social worker's bollocks. Feel any better now, Abby?" And of course, we know Abby does not like John in the first place, so she says, "Get out of my sight, Constantine. You're a disease." And then John walks up next to her on the bridge and says, "Yeah, well, I'm not the one who shopped our poor little girl to the men from Bloody Uncle. Christ, I thought I was a bastard." And Abby gets very angry at hearing that, and she gives him the evil eye, but John doesn't care, and he continues saying, "Oh, if looks could kill, eh? Obviously, I've touched a nerve." And Abby fires back, "If I hadn't turned Tefe over to the government, she would have helped Alec destroy the world. What else was I supposed to do?" Then she begins to cry and she says, "You're the one with all the answers, Constantine. What would you have done in my situation?" And John gives a little smile and says, "Smoked 2 packs of fags, got pissed, and made a pass at a barmaid. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about you. And deep down, you know you did the wrong thing today, right?" But Abby doesn't say anything, and John continues saying, "Right. It's not just because Tefe's your kid either, is it? I mean, your head says she and Alec are going to kill us all, but your heart says everything's going to be fine. Nothing to worry about." And Abby looks up and says, "God, yes, that's right. How do you know?" And John replies, "'Cause that's what I've been thinking too. Suppose we were taking Tefe and your old man, too literally all along. I know they said they were going to bump us all off, but what if this was a symbolic death for the old way of thinking? You and me might have helped put the brakes on the greatest thing that's ever happened. This is probably the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life, and that's saying something. But I reckon we should just trust our instincts here. They're all we can really depend on in this game, and the buggers have kept me alive this long. Why don't we help them out of this mess, eh?" And Abby replies, I don't know. It's not that simple, is it? This whole attack on Alex seems to have been planned like Desert Storm. And John cuts in saying, bollocks. My people might have planned this mission down to the color of fluff in your old boyfriend's belly button, but no plan's completely watertight. There's always some arsehole who can throw a well-aimed spanner in the works. And Abby asks, and how exactly do we manage that? And then John reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out his box of magic wishing matches. And he says, easy peasy. All you have to do is make a wish. Then we turn the page and we cut back to the laboratory where Tefe was being kept. And it is a bloodbath. All of the guards are now like torn in half and their guns are like nailing them to the wall. And we see Woodrew's disembodied head is on the floor as well. So he has also been killed. And very eerily, his tape recorder where he was giving all those narration notes is playing in the background. And I guess a couple people who have survived are now in the room and they come over to Woodrew's little tape recorder and they push stop. And one of the soldiers says, vicious little bitch. Look at these poor bastards. They never stood a chance. Not a hope in hell. Shit. How the hell did she get out anyway? So it seems that maybe Abby's wish or John's wish was for Tefe to escape, but in the process, she just massacred everybody in this room. Then we cut back to Swamp Thing's garden with Alec and the Word is saying to him, if my siblings were here instead of me, he might transform into a candle and light your wick, turn your bones to sand, or administer any number of more elaborate executions. The Word, however, is too old for such folly. I'm just here to murder you, Holland. Anything else is insignificant. And staring at the Word, Alec replies, not entirely significant. Now, Tefe! And at this, the Word turns around and he sees Tefe flying at him, and Tefe looks crazy. Like, not in her face or anything, like her whole body has been transformed. Her upper torso and arms and head are still intact, but her lower body is like this really big, long, insect-like tube. And at the bottom of it, there's a big mouth-like orifice with teeth, and it has a bunch of like spider arms along its sides. And Tefe has grown wings, so she's flying towards the Word with this giant gaping mouth, and she says the word, Umau. And obviously that's not a word that any of us know, but maybe it's some sort of either magical word, or maybe it's the name of the Word himself, because at least with demons I know that knowing their name gives you power over them. And once she says that word, the Word himself, who looks terrified, is covered in a bright white light. And as we turn the page, we see his body completely dissipates, and all that's left is a couple wisps of red smoke. And Alec looks at Tefe and says, timed to perfection. So Abby's one magic wish was to set you free, just as Blake predicted it would be. Now tell me, child, how did you manage to defeat him? And Tefe, who transforms back into her 7-year-old self, says, easy. The Word had no material form. He was just the first thing the voice said when the earth began, a vibration of molecules through a medium. The exact opposite sound was all it took to cancel him out. An anti-word, if you like. The really hard part was assuming a form which could approximate the voice of God himself. And then she runs over to her dad and she gives him a big hug. And he says to her, clever girl. And she says, oh, Daddy, this means there's no one to stop us now. Now we can build this wonderful new world we've been planning, and there's no one left to stand in our way. This is fantastic. But Alec looks kind of sad, and he pushes her away and he says, I'm sorry, Tefe. You've done well here, but this is a spiritual journey I must take alone. You will be remembered fondly. And then he walks away from her, and of course she's confused. And as she stands there watching her dad walk away, a statue pops out of the ground as if Alec just made it in remembrance of her, and she calls to him, Daddy, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And then he turns back, and her body explodes. And as body parts fly past Alec's face, he doesn't have a bit of remorse in his eyes, and he says, goodbye, Tefe. Goodbye, Abby. Goodbye, Dr. Alec Holland, research molecular biologist, and the funny little life he considered so important. Goodbye, cruel world. Then the spirit of Alec is pulled out of his body, and the spirit of Alec basically looks like Swamp Thing when he's traveling through the green, so it's like an ethereal version of Swamp Thing. And he's literally pulled into space and into the sun, where he faces a fiery dragon. And as the dragon stares at Swamp Thing, it says to him,
This trial has ended, Holland Mind. You have reached the Parliament of Flames. We who sleep in the heart of the sun are the nuclear mother of all the parliaments. Older than air, older than water, and older than the earth itself. We have waited long for this moment. We gave birth to the worlds below 4.5 billion years ago, but only now has our brightest child reached maturity and returned to visit us. Authority over all flame has been waiting for you, Holland Mind. Use these ancient fires now to purge the last of humanity from your soul.
And with that, Swamp Thing's essence bursts into flames. And as he's imbued with this power of flames, he says, "Request nothing from me. Bow down instead, and cower in my presence, because I am your god, and you shall fear me, as they do on the earth below. I have nothing more to learn." But the fiery dragon replies,
On the contrary, the final step of your journey towards illumination has still to be taken. Your greatest sacrifice lies ahead. You embody the 4 elements, but this does not make you a god. You must prove yourself that you are above all sentiment and sever your final link with the past. Have you forgotten already?
and Swamp Thing replies, "No, I haven't forgotten." And the fire dragon says,
Then go, become the earth, and destroy this human virus which contaminates your body. They no longer serve any useful purpose.
So a flaming Swamp Thing takes off back to Earth. Then we turn the page and we cut to the moon, and we see 2 astronauts and a landing module. And the astronauts are just kind of walking around the surface of the moon. And over the comms of the astronauts, we hear someone say, "Pegasus 7, please respond. Do you read me? Our instruments are being affected by some weird sunspot activity. Are you guys doing okay up there? Over." And the astronaut replies, Wait a second, Houston. I can see something. I thought it was just a reflection off my helmet at first, but I can see something strange out there. Houston, this is Pegasus 7. We're both looking directly at a star which isn't mapped on any of the charts. It's burning a bright, pulsating light, brilliantly lit up like it's luminescent. Whoa, this is beautiful. It's totally miraculous. Then we see the fiery Swamp Thing shoot by in space, and the astronaut reaches out towards him. Then we get the guy on the comms again saying, "Pegasus 7, sunspot activity is getting worse. They're saying something's been fired from the surface of the sun. We're losing transmission. Do you read me? Over." And the astronaut replies, "Roger, Houston, but radio transmission is becoming garbled. We're mostly just picking up static at this end. Please repeat your statement." And then the astronaut's partner says, "Jesus Christ, look! And a bright light forms over the moon's horizon. And at first it kind of looks just like the sunset is rising. But then we see planet Earth come into view, and it is glowing super bright. And we don't hear anything the astronauts say, but it looks like they begin to freak out, and almost like they're getting on their hands and knees and bowing to it. Then we turn the page and we get a full page splash of this glowing Earth, and we see Swamp Thing's face made out in the continents. And that, my friends, is the last page of the issue, so we will have to wait for the conclusion of this storyline in the next episode. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains.and-comicbooks, all one word, @gmail.com. And remember, until next time, stay swampy.